fun එක next level කරන dialogue fan blaster.
Tonight, on First at 9 this Sunday the 22nd of December 2024. Regulates slaughterbots. Sri Lanka supports UN and ICRC efforts to regulate autonomous weapon systems. ICRC pledges to provide technical support for Sri Lanka's efforts to find missing Sri Lankans. Rise to riches. Sri Lanka generates over 4 billion rupees in revenue through rice import duties. More rice stocks to reach the island this week. The Peace Ark. Chinese PLA Navy ship Peace Ark arrives in Colombo on a friendly visit. Chinese naval personnel to provide medical assistance. The lion's share. The Western province accounts for the largest share of Sri Lanka's nominal GDP in 2023, reveals the central bank.
Chilo Dairy, Sri Lankawama Kiren Perata. Obe Vishwasi dinu Sensodyne, then Lagamati pharmacy in Labagata Hacker.
Kanta parisang karagathot? Api parisang.
Asian Paints Causeway Aquasafe Vesat Mattu Gedara Disney.
This is Derana First at 9, live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to Derana First at 9. I'm Aditya Drisingha joining you live with the latest in Sri Lanka and around the world. Now your top story this evening. The Additional Secretary to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Yasoja Gunasekara, claims that Sri Lanka welcomes the joint appeal by the Secretary General of the United Nations and the President of the International Committee of the Red Cross to urgently establish new international rules on autonomous weapon systems by 2026. Speaking at a seminar in Colombo, she further emphasized that Sri Lanka also supports the creation of a legally binding instrument to prohibit or regulate autonomous weapon systems. Meanwhile, Severin Chapas, the country head of the International Committee of the Red Cross, also attending the event, commended Sri Lanka's efforts in establishing a missing persons office to address issues still affecting Sri Lankans at the other end of the 3-decade-long civil war. A seminar organized in collaboration with the Lakshman Khadragamar Institute and the International Committee of the Red Cross on Artificial Intelligence, Autonomous Weapon Systems and Contemporary Challenges was recently held in Colombo.
Geneva Convention and other texts comes down to one fundamental agreement. Even in wars, humanity must be preserved. Elements that are particularly relevant to Sri Lanka today in relation to international humanitarian law. The post-conflict application of international humanitarian law, and it applies particularly to the issue of missing persons. IHL recognizes the family's right to know the fate and whereabouts of their missing loved one, the right for a missing person to be searched, as well as the obligation to prevent people from going missing. The creation of the Office of Missing Person by the government of Sri Lanka, with a clear mandate, has been a very concrete step toward the implementation of this obligation. The next step, it must be the search for the missing person and providing answers to the families. And on that, of course, as the ICRC, we are ready to provide our technical support. And the voice of Sri Lanka has been very, very clear regarding the grave risks raised by autonomous weapons and the urgent need for new international rules on this system, as well as a new legally binding instrument.
Raises serious concerns over the fundamental principles of international humanitarian law and poses challenges in legal, ethical, security, technological, and humanitarian aspects. The disturbing reality of removal of the human element from the loop could result in anonymous selection of targets without human intervention and breach of the principles of distinction, proportionality, and precaution, as such weapons do not distinguish between civilians and combatants, as well as civilian and military infrastructure. Sri Lanka has been strongly supporting the negotiation of a legally binding instrument to prohibit and regulate lethal autonomous weapon systems. It is our firm belief that responsible chain of command and human control on the use of weapon systems should be retained in the entire life cycle of the autonomous weapon systems, as accountability cannot be transferred to machines under any circumstances. In this context, Sri Lanka welcomes the joint appeal by the Secretary General of the United Nations and the President of the ICRC to urgently establish new international rules on AWS by 2026. From a security perspective, the deployment of autonomous weapon systems could lead to asymmetric warfare. It may also increase the likelihood of conflict escalation, as states are more inclined to engage in armed conflicts when the risk of military casualties is minimized for the user state. Additional risks of AWS include the potential proliferation, access by non-state actors, and even the possibility of mass destruction.
Artificial intelligence itself, indeed, a technology that can be used in different ways. Artificial intelligence doesn't mean its applicability or doesn't mean its relevance to armed conflicts only, indeed. But it's heavily used today for decision making. The issue here is that indeed the way it is being used needs to be considered and reconsidered many times in order to ensure that the way it's used do not contribute to the violations of IHL. Switching to autonomous weapon systems, which also quite heavily rely on the main issue with it is unpredictability of the technology. We really don't know how the technology will behave in the battlefield in the difficult circumstances that armed conflicts provide. From the humanitarian perspectives, indeed, whether autonomous weapon systems will be allowed and will be able actually to deal with the issues that were laid by states while limiting the means and methods of warfare in IHL. The ethical one that has been raised already. Whether we are happy if machine will start killing. Legal one, how to ensure that the machine, the autonomous weapon system, is in conformity with IHL, with specific rules of IHL. Whether it will be able to distinguish between military objectives and civilian objects, between combatants and civilians. Whether it will be able to understand that a military, for example, that a combatant is surrendering, is hors de combat, out of the battle, and thus need to be spared.
On lethal autonomous weapons, Sri Lanka was able to make an useful contribution during Sri Lanka's chairmanship of the CCW in 2015. At a time I served as the ambassador in Geneva. We were able to upgrade the discussion on laws in the CCW, which previously was only between experts and not at national level, to national level. And through this process, within an year, to ensure that the CCW was able to establish an open-ended group of government experts, a GGG, to study, agree on possible recommendations and options relating to emerging technologies on the laws.
Union Assurance.
Welcome to Cinnamon Life, South Asia's biggest entertainment hub, where awe awaits.
චන්දුරුසුනේ කාගෙන් බලා සිංහ TV සඳහා සුපිරි ඩීල්.
Sadaharita Plantations Limited, celebrating 22 years of your trust.
Aspirations Education, a pioneer in overseas education. Meet our experts at top destinations worldwide. Your trusted and caring partner in overseas education.
The Asian Human Rights Commission has urged President Anuradisa Nayaka to take immediate action to implement critical legal reforms aimed at restoring the rule of law in the country. In a written appeal, Director of Policy and Programs at the AHRC, Basil Fernando, highlighted the pressing need to address key deficiencies in the country's legal and judicial systems. Accordingly, 3 crucial areas which require immediate reform have been identified by the AHRC. The organization stressed the importance of ensuring the daily hearing of serious criminal cases in the high courts to expedite the judicial process and reduce delays in justice delivery. It also called for the introduction of comprehensive legislation to combat bribery and corruption, a measure deemed essential to restore public confidence in governance and accountability. In addition, the AHRC also highlighted the necessity of reforming the Attorney General's Department to enhance its independence, efficiency and transparency. Norwegian ambassador to India and Sri Lanka, May Elinstina, paid a courtesy call on Prime Minister Dr. Harani Amarasuriya to discuss fostering a collaborative partnership between the two nations. The Prime Minister's office claims that the discussion primarily focused on poverty alleviation, social protection measures, tax reforms, renewable energy and employment generation. During the meeting, Prime Minister Dr. Amarasuriya emphasized the importance of transforming Sri Lanka's education system and highlighted ongoing efforts to digitize governance for improved public service delivery.
Fast-track your career from O-levels with eSoft.
Diabetes all, සීනිවලින් පරිස්සම් වන ඔබට අමතක නොවන පෝෂණය.
Prime Group ලංකාවේ ප්‍රථම වතාවට හඳුන්වා දෙන land leasing ලේසියෙන් මීටමක්.
Single 1111 up to 60% off from the 11th November to the 17th of November.
Kalani wire කිසිගින්නක් නෑ.
කිසිගින්නක් නෑ. Kalani Fire Shield Wire.
Apico Mattress. Samay sapata nidiyan Apico Springs for mattress madiri rasakin.
Now in some other news on Prime Minister Dr. Harani Amarasuriya, the Prime Minister also met with the Country Director of the Asian Development Bank, Sri Lanka Resident Mission, Takafumi Kadunu. The discussions underscored ADB's role as a key development partner and highlighted the importance of collaborative efforts in advancing Sri Lanka's national development priorities. During the discussion, Prime Minister highlighted the importance of developing school infrastructure, teacher training and assessment mechanisms. The ADB also reaffirmed its commitment to addressing challenges in the education sector through ongoing projects. Now in other local news, the Sri Lanka Customs disclosed that the government has generated a total revenue of 4.3 billion rupees via duties charged on the stocks of rice imported to the country. Meanwhile, with the festivities fast approaching, Sri Lankan State Trading Corporation revealed that 5,200 metric tons of rice will reach the shores of Sri Lanka on the 24th of this month and cool the local market, heating up at the moment with an acute shortage of rice. As Sri Lanka's rice shortage escalated over months, the government implemented several measures to address the nationwide shortage of rice supply. In order to contain the situation, the President convened a meeting with the mill owners to discuss relevant matters, imposed maximum wholesale and retail prices, conducted raids on rice mills through the Consumer Affairs Authority and facilitated rice imports from several foreign markets. According to the Sri Lanka Customs, 67,000 metric tons of rice have been imported since the granting of import permission. This includes 38,500 metric tons of Nadu rice and 28,500 metric tons of raw rice. Sri Lanka Customs disclosed that the government generated a revenue of 4.3 billion rupees via import duties from those rice stocks, calculated at a rate of 65 rupees per kilogram. Meanwhile, the Sri Lanka State Trading Corporation and Lanka Satasa were authorized to import 70,000 metric tons of Nadu rice into the country. Accordingly, Lanka Satasa has so far imported 10,800 metric tons of rice, while the Sri Lanka State Trading Corporation placed two tenders for 5,200 metric tons and 20,800 metric tons of rice. Chairman of the Sri Lanka State Trading Corporation, Ravindra Fernando, disclosed that the first tender of 5,200 metric tons will arrive in the island on the 24th of December this year.
The taxes were not reduced considering the plight of the farmers. However, given the appreciation of the dollar, discussions are underway on matters related to import duties. The appreciation of the dollar in the recent past has caused an impact. Some may question whether price controls need to be abandoned for the time being. However, if that is the case, the consumers will have to purchase rice at a higher price. Therefore, as a government, we intend to address the rice shortage in the country while also ensuring that the farming community will not be affected as a result.
According to reports, subsequent to the imports, the rice shortage which persisted in the country alleviated. However, traders across various regions raised concerns over the inadequate quantities of rice stocks available in the market. The Chinese People's Liberation Army's Navy hospital ship Peace Ark arrived at the Colombo port yesterday to begin a 7-day friendly visit and provide medical assistance in Sri Lanka. The visiting ship, crewed by 310 personnel under the command of Captain Den Kiang, was welcomed by the Sri Lanka Navy in accordance with naval traditions. As part of the official visit, the hospital ship Peace Ark, in collaboration with the Embassy of the People's Republic of China in Sri Lanka, will organize medical treatments and clinics on board. They will be conducted by the medical staff of the PSAC and the Sri Lankan Navy's medical department. The Chinese People's Liberation Army Navy hospital ship PSAC will conclude its visit and depart the island on the 28th of December. The Minister of Finance has announced the establishment of a public debt management office to oversee government borrowing and track the obligations of state enterprises and subnational bodies. The agency was initiated on the 2nd of December and is expected to be fully operational by January 2026, centralizing functions currently handled by various other agencies.
To the Ministry, the Public Debt Management Act provides the legal framework for the creation of the operationally independent PDMO. This office will strengthen and centralize the management of public debt, enhancing accountability and transparency, and ensure the implementation of efficient and transparent borrowing practices, which are essential for debt sustainability and the long-term fiscal health of the country. Key responsibilities of the PDMO will include managing government debt, issuing and managing loan guarantees, overseeing on lending operations, recording and reporting on public debt. State agencies seeking to borrow funds must coordinate with the PDMO and obtain prior written approval from the Finance Ministry for any public issue of government securities, foreign loans, or the issuance of guarantees by the state-owned enterprises. SOEs will be required to submit the terms and conditions for each planned borrowing along with copy of the executed debt contract. Additionally, each provincial council, local authority and state-owned enterprise will be required to report their outstanding debt at the end of each quarter. The PDMO will assume responsibilities currently carried out by the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, the Department of External Resources and the Department of Treasury Operations. As such, the newly established office will handle the following operations: preparation and publication of the medium-term debt management strategy, the annual borrowing plan, and auction calendars for the issuance of government securities, negotiation of financial terms and conditions, and execution of domestic and external borrowings, credit arrangements, and other debt management activities. Maintaining relationships to ensure continued access to financial markets, coordinating debt operations with cash flow management, preparing and executing debt-related liability management operations, assessing credit risk and advising on risk mitigation strategies for loan guarantees and on lending operations, recording, reporting, disseminating and publishing information on public debt, loan guarantees, on lending suppliers' credit and other financial instruments, ensuring the timely servicing of government debt, and preparing debt service forecasts.
And now to some thoughts shared across the political spectrum today.
ලංකාවේ උතුරට එකක් කියලා දකුණට එකක් කියලා නැගෙනහිරට තව එකක් කියලා ඡන්දෙ ගත්තා වගේ නෙමෙයි ඉන්දියාවට එකක් කියලා චීනයට එකක් කියලා ජාත්‍යන්තරයට කියපු කිසි දෙයක් ලංකාවේ ඇවිල්ලා කියන්නේ නැතුව වෙන වෙන කතා ලංකාවට කියලා මේ විදියට විදේශ ප්‍රතිපත්තිය ගෙනියන්න ලේස්ති වුණොත් එහෙම තව අමාරුවක වැටෙන එක තමයි වෙන්නේ කියලා අපට ආණ්ඩුවට කියන්න තියෙන්නේ.
හැම දවසකම අලි මිනිස් ගැටුම නිසා එක්ක මිනිස්සු මැරෙනවා එක්ක අලි මැරෙනවා. රිලව් නිසා වගාබිම් එහෙම් පිටින්ම පාළු වෙනවා. මේ කිසිදු ප්‍රශ්නයක් විපක්ෂයේ ප්‍රශ්න බවට පරිවර්තනය වුණේ නැහැ. ඔවුන්ගේ එකම ප්‍රශ්නේ බවට පරිවර්තනය කරගත්තේ ජාතික ජනබලවේගයේ മന്ത്രിවරුන්ගේ අධ්‍යාපන සුසුකම්. අපි ඕනෑම වෙලාවක ජාතික ජනබලවේගයේ മന്ത്രിවරු 159 දෙනාම අපි ලෑස්ති අපේ අධ්‍යාපන සුසුකම් මේ රටේ ජනතාවට කියන්න.
තමන්ගේ කණ්ඩායම ක්ලීන් කරනවා රට ක්ලීන් කරන්න කලින්. මේකේ වෙබ් අඩවියේ නම් දාපු කී දෙනෙක්ගේ අධ්‍යාපන සුසුකම් මේ වෙනකොට ගලවලා තියෙනවා. ජනාධිපති අරමුදලෙන් මං හිතන්නේ තව 2010ට කලින් ගත්ත ලයිස්තුව තාම එළියට ආවේ නැහැ. ඒ ලයිස්තුව එළියට ආවම ඕගොල්ලෝ පුදුම හිතන නම් ඔක්කොම ඒ කියන්නේ පොඩි ඉංගියක් දීලා යනවා. ලොකු කට්ටියද සාමාන්‍ය කට්ටියද නිර්ධන පන්තියේ කට්ටියද ඔක්කොම ඒ නම් ටික බලා ගන්න පුළුවන්. ඊට දාන්න ඕනේ. මේක Tamanට වාසි වෙනකොට ඒ වාසි නමුයි Tamanට අවාසි වෙන නමුයි හංගගෙන එහෙම එළියට දාලා තේරුමක් නැහැ.
මේ රටේ ජනතාවට අපි කියන්නේ ඔබට පූර්ණ අයිතියක් තියෙනවා ඕනම ඇත්තකදී වුණත් එය බොරුවක් කියලා කියන්න. ඕනම බොරුවකදී වුණත් ඒක ඇත්තක් කියලා කියන්න ඔබට අයිතිය තියෙනවා. ඒකේ අනිත් පැතිකඩට ගියොත් කෙනෙක් ආයතනයක් ඒක ආණ්ඩුවක් වුණත් හොඳ දෙයක් කරනකොට ඒකේ නරක දකින්න ඔබට අයිතියක් තියෙනවා. ඒ වගේම යම් නායකයෙක් ආණ්ඩුවක් ආයතනයක් හෝ පුද්ගලයෙක් දැඩිව සමාජයට බලපාන නරක කරද්දි නෑ ඒක හොඳයි කියලා ඒකට යම් පැසසුමක් දෙන්න හොඳක් කියන්න ඔබට අයිතිය තියෙනවා. ඒක ඔබේ අයිතිය. ඒ ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදී අයිතියට කිසිදාක අපි ආණ්ඩුවක් විදියට වැට බැඳලා නැහැ.
Welcome back. Now issues grappling Sri Lanka's agriculture sector are the focus of our News in Brief segment tonight. We take your attention particularly to the catastrophic and fatal developments in the North Central province, where the human-elephant conflict has claimed yet another life while causing severe crop damage.
Subsequent to studies conducted by the relevant authorities attached to the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock, Lands and Irrigation, the government has declared that the stock of muriate of potash fertilizer donated by a Russian state-owned company is suitable for use in Sri Lanka. The declaration was made by the Ministry of Agriculture, Livestock, Lands and Irrigation in a bid to address concerns raised by the farming community over the colour of the donated fertilizer. According to the official sources, 2,392.15 metric tons of MOP fertilizer will be distributed to farmers island-wide. Meanwhile, certain farmers complain that they have still not received the fertilizer allowance of 25,000 rupees per hectare promised by the government to be given during the 2024 to 2025 Maha season. In other news concerning the country's agriculture sector, several acres of paddy were destroyed by a herd of elephants in the Kahalagala Alahara region of Polonnaruwa. In a separate incident, the life of a 60-year-old man was claimed by a wild elephant in Bakmuna, Polonnaruwa. Over in Ududumbara, meanwhile, farmers launched a protest over the severe crop damage caused by monkeys in the area. In other local news, officials of the Consumer Affairs Authority conducted a special raid yesterday, visiting boutiques in Petta specializing in cosmetic products. During the raid, officials strongly warned the merchants not to sell any cosmetic products to consumers, sans information on the importers of the same products. Subsequently, officials took sealed off several products which did not have information of importers.
Now, as the year comes to an end, Sri Lanka welcomed over 1.9 million tourists so far this year, growing closer to the year-end target of surpassing 2.3 million tourist arrivals. Per the statistics issued by the Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority, there is an uptick in tourists visiting the country, with November recording over 184,000 arrivals this year, the highest since July.
Growing closer to Sri Lanka's target of attracting 2.3 million tourists by the end of the year, the country welcomed 1,901,988 tourists so far this year. According to the reports of the Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority, 97,115 tourists have visited the country during the first 15 days of December. During the second week of this month, 48,126 tourist arrivals were recorded as the highest number of arrivals within the month of December. Meanwhile, indicating an uptick in tourist arrivals, the month of November recorded a total of 184,158 arrivals, marking a significant increase from 135,907 recorded in October this year. The highest number of tourists arrived from India, with a total of 385,267 Indian tourists visiting the island so far this year till the 15th of December. The Russian Federation held its previous spot as the country with the second highest number of tourist arrivals, with a total of 180,414 arrivals during the same period. Significant number of tourist arrivals was also recorded from United Kingdom, Germany and China.
Now, according to the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, the Western province has contributed 43.7% of Sri Lanka's nominal GDP in 2023, making it the largest share. However, this indicated a marginal decline in its contribution compared to the previous year of 2022. The Western province secured a strong lead in the industry and services sectors, while the Northwestern and Central provinces secured second and third positions. The Northwestern province accounted for 10.9% and the Central province accounted for 10.3%. In a statement, the CBSL claimed that the shares of the Central, North Central, Northern and Southern provinces increased in 2023 compared to 2022. Further, the nominal GDP of all provinces grew in 2023, yet at a slower pace compared to the previous year. The Northwestern Province led in agriculture activities, contributing to a share of 19.6% last year, followed by the Southern Province with 13.5% and the Central Province with 12.4%. The Western Province accounted for the largest share of 45.9% of service activities, followed by the Central Province with 10.4% and the Southern Province with 9.9%. Welcome back. Now in your world news, Iceland's new government, headed by Prime Minister Kristersson Frostadóttir of the Social Democratic Alliance, officially took office with promises to cut inflation and interest rates and hold a referendum on European Union membership by 2027. For the first time in Iceland, the leaders of all governing parties will be women, and this is the first time that the country will have a female Prime Minister and a female President.
Iceland's president presented a new government under Social Democratic Alliance's Prime Minister Kristersson Frostadóttir that aims to cut inflation and interest rates and hold a referendum on European Union membership by 2027. Kristersson Frostadóttir, who is 36 years old, will be the youngest Prime Minister in Icelandic history. Icelandic media reported that Frostadóttir's centre-left Social Democratic Alliance became the biggest party in a snap election on the 30th of November and has agreed to form a coalition government with the centrist People's Party and the left-leaning pro-European Reform Party. It was also reported that the leader of the Reform Party, Thorgerður Katrín Gunnarsdóttir, will be the Minister of Foreign Affairs. It will be the first time in Iceland's history that the leaders of all the governing parties will be women, and the first time that the country will have a female Prime Minister and a female President, with incumbent President Halla Tómasdóttir. The new government replaces a government by former Prime Minister Bjarni Benediktson's Conservative Independence Party, which came second in the election, called after coalition disagreements and public discontent over migration and energy and housing issues.
That's all the news we have for you tonight. Thank you. Have a great night.